Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how you can use the theory of similar triangles and ratios to find unknown lengths. Before I go into this theory of similar triangles, let me just remind you what ratio means. A ratio is a fraction, so those two words can be used interchangeably. So when you think ratio, you want to think fraction. So here is the theory of similar triangles. It says, if two triangles are similar, the ratios of their corresponding sides are always equal. Alright, so we're going to form the ratios by looking at the little triangle and the big triangle. So we have left side of the little triangle is A, left side of the big triangle is C. So the fraction on the left is A over C, so that's little triangle, the left side of the little triangle divided by the left side of the big triangle. Now we're setting that ratio equal to another fraction, or another ratio. All right, so here we have B over D, so that's bottom of the little triangle divided by bottom of the big triangle. Before we start actually calculating anything, let me just describe this picture to you. The problem here says, use ratios to find the unknown lengths. Alright, so if we look at this picture, we have a big triangle, and inside of that we have a little triangle. So the first thing I would do is I would separate this into two triangles. What I've done on this page is I've just separated the triangle into the little triangle, which was the one on the inside, and the big triangle, which was the one on the outside. I haven't redrawn this perfectly, so you notice like my arrows are a little wonky, but I think you get the general idea. Right, so the thing that makes this problem a little bit easier is that we know all of the sides of the little triangle. Alright, so we are now going to set up a proportion. Remember, that's a ratio equal to a ratio. We're going to set up a proportion and use that proportion to solve for x, and then we'll use a proportion to solve for y. Now, I'm going to start by solving for y because that's the easier one to find, and then I'll find x. So the first thing we're going to do is solve for y. So if you look at the big triangle, y is on the right side of the big triangle. So we know that needs to be involved in our proportion that we set up. So here's what we're going to do now. You want to look at your triangle and you say, okay, well, on my little triangle, I know every side. So let's look on the big triangle. On the big triangle, I know the left-hand side. Right, so the first thing you got to do before you do anything else, before you set up your proportion, you're going to go ahead and add together 30 plus 30, and that's going to tell you what the left-hand side of the big triangle is. Once you've done that, you know that you're going to have to use the left side of the big triangle and the left side of the little triangle because that's what you know both of. So that tells us how to set up our proportion. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, I gave you a hint. It says this is how you're going to set up your proportion. It's going to be left side of the little triangle divided by left side of the big triangle equals right side of the little triangle divided by right side of the big triangle. So on this slide, you'll see the actual calculations that I performed to solve for y. So the first thing that I did was I took that triangle from the last slide and I went ahead and combined 30 plus 30 to give me 60 for the left side of the big triangle. Right, and I've went ahead and just kind of cleaned that up a little bit so it looks a little bit neater. So now I want to take a look at my triangles. So I know that the left-hand side of the little triangle is 30. The left-hand side of the big triangle is 60. So that's the left side of my proportion is 30 over 60. So little triangle over big triangle. I set that equal to the right side of the little triangle divided by the right side of the big triangle. So that's 32 over y. Once you have your proportion set up, you're just going to cross multiply. So I've taken y times 30, or 30 times y, and then I have 60 times 32 on the right hand side. Right, so now I'm going to multiply those things out. So 30 times y is 30y. 60 times 32 is 1920. And then the last thing I need to do to get y by itself is divide both sides by 30. So 1920 over 30 gives you 64. So y is 64. That's your final answer. Now that we've solved for y, we can move on to step 2, which is to solve for x. Now I've given you a hint here on how to set up this proportion. So you can see here that I've set it up as left-hand side of the little triangle divided by left-hand side of the big triangle. I've set that equal to bottom of the little triangle divided by bottom of the big triangle. So the half of this equation looks exactly the same as the first step. The only thing that's changed is instead of having right side of the little triangle and right side of the big triangle, I'm using the bottom of the big triangle and the bottom of the little triangle. Now the reason that I'm using the bottoms of the little triangle and the big triangle instead of the right hand side is because that's where x is located. So since I'm trying to find x, I need to use the bottom of the big triangle and consequently the bottom of the little triangle in my proportion. Now what you need to do is go ahead and plug in what those numbers are. So go ahead and plug in what you know the left side of the little triangle is and the left side of the big triangle, and then what you know the bottom of the little triangle is, and then for the bottom of the big triangle you're going to have a sum. So it's going to be 31 plus x. Now we're going to start doing the algebra portion of solving for x. You should have already set up your proportion using the hint that I gave you on the previous slide. On the left side of the proportion we have 30 divided by 60. This is because it's the left-hand side of the little triangle divided by the left-hand side of the big triangle. On the right-hand side of our proportion, we have 31 over 31 plus x. That's because the bottom of the little triangle is 31 and the bottom of the big triangle is 31 plus x. Now we're going to cross multiply. Notice that I'm putting 31 plus x in parentheses. That's so that I will remember to multiply 30 times 31 and 30 times x. And then on the right hand side we have 60 times 31. Now I'm going to multiply through by 30 on the left hand side. And you'll notice that on the right hand side I went ahead and multiplied 60 times 31, which gave me 1860. Now I'm going to multiply through by 30. So I have 30 times 31 is 930. And then 30 times x is 30x. Now again, I'm trying to get x by itself, so the next thing we should do is subtract 930 from both sides. If you subtract 930 from the right hand side, that gives you 1860 minus 930, which is 930. Our last step is to divide both sides by 30 to solve for x. That gives you your final answer, which is 930 divided by 30, which is 31.